Lori Pacheca. I'm interested in the period of time when all smaller Scientology orgs were told to have only OTs to run them. Could you explain this policy? Were you the manager of Pacific orgs when this was being implemented? Any insider stuff about how this change worked in practice would be interesting. Like, did the OTs actually want these posts? Most were public Scientologists, I think. Well, actually, you're asking the right person in a couple different ways, Lori. So let me give you some history and background as best as I remember it. This was all, 15, 13 years ago. So my memory is a little on some of these things. But here's basically the sequence of events that led to the ideal orgs as far as I was concerned. At the time, I think this was 2002 or so, maybe 2003, I was in management of the Western United States orgs, and I was over the delivery of those orgs. My post was called the Assistant Technical Aide for the Western United States, or the A-Tech Aide, is how it was abbreviated. And that put me over all the auditing and training delivery in all of the West US orgs, all the orgs west of the Mississippi, all the way out to Hawaii. So in that capacity, I was sort of overseeing delivery and trying to get all the churches to, get more people in and this kind of thing, and been doing this for many, many years. And then I got pulled up to the next higher echelon of management, which was over at the Hollywood Guarantee Building, or the HGB. And that echelon of management was called the Flag Bureaus. And I was going to go out on a mission, a Sea Org mission, which was called an observation mission. In other words, you go out and you don't do anything in terms of giving a bunch of orders and directions. An observation mission is simply to go out and get information, gather data, interviewing people, getting information, maybe doing some surveys or whatever. And there's all kinds of observation missions that have been done for all kinds of reasons. But this one was specifically, I was shown a dispatch that apparently had 11 points on it. I don't remember all of them, that were written by David Miscavige. And this had to do with, this was called the Buffalo Program. And this was because it was named after Buffalo Org, the Buffalo Church of Scientology, where they had done some kind of number, or were looking at doing some kind of number. Oh yeah, the Buffalo pattern, right, or the Buffalo strategy. I was called both of those things. And basically one of the points of these 11 points was it was a series of actions to take in order to get the orgs going and get them moving and get more activity going and get the field around the org, all the Scientologists in their area, more active. And one of the points on there was to get a bunch of auditors, and another point was to revamp or revitalize the flag-trained technical staff who were there. But another one of the points, and this one ended up being a huge point, was to recruit, get the OTs on board. Get them recruited, make them the executives of the orgs. And this was a direct target, directive from David Miscavige. So the observation mission I was going to go on was to go to San Jose, to the Stevens Creek org and the Mountain View org and maybe the San Francisco org, but definitely in the South Bay area. And also there's a Los Gatos, there's a Church of Scientology at Los Gatos. So I was going to go to San Jose, I was going to go to Stevens Creek and survey who were the OTs in that area, who should be joining staff, who of those OTs should be executives. And I didn't end up going on that observation mission because I mentioned my post title was the Assistant Technical Aide for the West US. Well, at that senior level of management was a guy whose job was the technical aide or the tech aide. He was my senior, giving me directions from that level. And he saw that I was going to be yanked to go do this mission. And he was like, yeah, no, not you. I need you doing what you're doing on your job. And so he nixed that. And I didn't end up going on that observation mission, which would have been the very first mission fired out to implement or start getting data to implement this Buffalo strategy or Buffalo pattern, which became the ideal org strategy and the ideal org pattern, right? Where they renovate the buildings and do all this fundraising and do all this stuff. That fundraising activity we talk about because of the nonsense and pressure and high sales, high pressure sales tactics and all that gets used. But there was more to the ideal org strategy than just buying a building and renovating it. This business of getting the OTs on staff as the executives of these orgs was a key part of this strategy. And so it ended up, as the years progressed and as the strategy rolled out, it became not a requirement that the ED, the executive director of all the various churches that we were renovating and building up and making ideal, they didn't always have to be OT, but it was way preferred. It was pushed, like, let's find OTs, let's get OTs on as the EDs, as the deputy executive directors, as the executive council, which is 3 staff who exist underneath the executive director and run the various areas under, there's an HCO executive secretary, an org executive secretary, and a public executive secretary, and they each have 3 or 4 divisions under them that they run. And minimally, it was wanted that that executive council and the ED and the DED, the deputy executive director, would all be OTs, right? And so searches were being done, fields were being scoured, and recruitment missions were firing out to get these OTs specifically recruited. The idea being that an OT, even if untrained, would be more capable and able than the EDs who were running these orgs into the ground, as far as David Miscavige was concerned, because the orgs weren't going anywhere. They weren't doing anything really very productive. They weren't expanding and successful. And Miscavige blamed the org executives, and of course I'm sure he had his share of blame to us managers as well. We were certainly feeling some of that wrath. Not personally, they didn't come down and beat on us or anything, but we were getting the orders, down the lines. So this ideal org thing, this buffalo pattern, was a whole change, and I got very excited about it. Because at the time, being in the position I was in, I was ready for a change. And it looked like David Miscavige was taking a personal interest in the orgs and getting things going with the orgs, and it looked like these targets were sensible things to do within the context of the world of Scientology, because OTs are, of course, supposed to be more able and more aware and more perceptive and this kind of thing. We wondered about the fact that they weren't trained. We weren't down with that. From a management level, we knew that if you were going to be the ED of an organization, you had to know what you were doing, and if you were going to do it right. And the executive training for a lot of the org EDs was really just sort of trial by fire and, flying by the seat of their pants, learning as they went. But many of them had been on for so many years that they knew the ropes. They knew how things worked. They knew how to get things done and keep the doors open at least, and try to comply with all the, panoply of orders that we were sending them all the time, which of course were coming from Miscavige mainly, but we didn't really know that, right? We thought that there was still the ED-int and these various senior executives on post doing their jobs. We didn't know about the whole. We didn't know about the conditions at the int base. We didn't know that Miscavige had been, just doing a sort of a slash and burn up there with all those people. And so we thought that these guys were all still there doing their jobs. We were doing our jobs, and we thought that's how things were running. I didn't find out till years later that Miscavige was, kind of single-handedly doing what was going on as far as management was concerned, which now makes a lot of sense as to why it was so insane. Anyway, so that was kind of the strategy as it rolled out, and then it wasn't a very successful strategy because, as you can see, all the ideal orgs are really, as we call them, ideal morgues, because they are dead. And whether you have an ED who is an OT or not, that's not the determining factor as to whether the place is going to be viable and successful. If you want a viable, successful Scientology organization, you need to be out there selling books and getting new people to come in and getting them on services and getting them to pay for those services and getting them moved on up the line, which is a near Herculean task at this point, given the toxic public recognition of Scientology's name. Which is all 100% at, the responsibility for that is at David Miscavige's feet. and fists. So, anyway, so that's kind of how that whole thing rolled out. And I hope that gives you a little bit of history as I saw it and experienced it. You know, when I went back after not doing that observation mission, I went back down to the CLO in Los Angeles at the Big Blue. And I went back on my job, but now I knew something other people didn't know. And I was really interested in how this was going to roll out. And it rolled out with a lot of pressure and a lot of heat to get these OTs going onto staff. And they did end up sending recruitment missions to the Bay Area and then to other areas where they started building up these ideal organizations. So that's that was another part of the whole big picture as you've learned about it here and in other places.